Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Astronomy Toronto. My name is Randy Attwood, and I'm the president of the Toronto Centre of the Royal Astronomical Society of Canada. Astronomy Toronto is seen here on the Rogers Network at 8 o'clock on the last Wednesday of every month. For the next 60 minutes, we'll be holding a live telephone phone-in, and we'll be inviting you to call us and ask us any questions what we might be talking about on tonight's topic. Tonight, we're going to be looking at and discussing UFOs and life in our universe. And my guest tonight is John Kenny from the McLaughlin Planetarium. And he wrote the show last year on UFOs.
UFO myth or mystery.
And supposedly a UFO expert.
UFO, well, I'm not sure if I call myself an expert, but it's certainly a field that's fascinating to investigate, and a great wealth of information comes out of a look at UFO as a cultural and also as a scientific phenomenon.
How far back do UFOs go, John?
Well, the modern UFO era traces its origin really to 1947. At that time, an American pilot by the name of Kenneth Arnold was flying over near Mount Washington, in the state of, or Mount Rainier, I should say, in the state of Washington, and he saw what he called discs, which seemed to skip like saucers flying across the mountaintops. He landed at the airport, reported his sighting to airport officials, to reporters. It was a slow news day, and they picked up on this term saucer. And they then coined the phrase flying saucer, and after that, UFO sightings, flying saucer sightings, started to pour in from around the world.
Well, it might seem strange to the people out there wondering why an astronomy show would be talking about UFOs, but it's really a subject which a lot of astronomers like to investigate, because a lot of the objects that we really see up in the sky aren't really these saucers or spaceships, but they have to do with astronomical objects.
Well, in fact, that's very true. About 40% of all UFO sightings turn out actually to be bright astronomical objects. For example, the planet Venus. And I think the first slide we have tonight is Venus. And if we could...
okay, here we go.
Venus is the brightest planet that we see in the sky. It's so bright because it has cloud cover on it, and the clouds reflect the sunlight. Venus is also the closest planet to us, and so it is surprisingly bright. It's the second brightest object in the nighttime sky after the moon. The second brightest planet in the sky after Venus is the planet Jupiter, and I think we have an image of Jupiter here as seen through a telescope. Jupiter is bright not so much because it's close to us, but the fact that it's the largest planet. It's a massive planet. Now, this is how people tend to think of the planets. An image such as the one we see right here. In actual fact, if you were to go outside and look this evening, you'd be able to see Venus just after sunset, in fact. And in the sky, you don't see something like this when you look at Jupiter. What you see,
boy, was that ever good,
is an object that looks like a very, very, very bright star.
Okay, so in the next slide, we have a picture that was taken just with a camera of what the planets would look like.
Okay, so we spent a lot of time.
And you can see, in fact, in this picture that the sky is still quite bright. It's not completely dark, and yet look how bright these planets are. And
there's 7 people on the committee, and 3 people
the
in
lowest
charge
one,
of each
there you see
division
just
of the
over that
committee.
tree is
Sandy and I
Venus.
are in charge.
Just above Venus there is Saturn, and to the left of Saturn is Jupiter. Above that is an actual star.
Well, they don't look much different from stars. Are they always grouped together in the sky in the same place?
No, this was just a coincidence that these planets happen to be in the same part of the sky. But what happens is that you see a very bright object, and when they're low on the horizon, you can see these planets are just over the tree line. You're looking through a lot of air. And the same phenomena that causes stars to twinkle makes planets appear to sparkle. There have been reports of Venus actually being red, blue, green, purple, because of this scintillation caused by the motion in the atmosphere. Other phenomena like this cause the planets to seem to move. Again, there are psychological things in the eye, a phenomenon called autokinesis, that makes bright objects appear to move in the sky. And so if you actually trace down, ask people, what did the object look like? Well, it was about the size of a star. Where was it? Well, it was in the western sky just after sunset. Did it seem to move? No, it just sort of hung around over the horizon. Well, then you can be almost certain that what you're looking at is a bright planet.
During the next few months, the planet Venus is going to become brighter and brighter in our western sky, about a half hour after sunset, and certainly this is going to cause a lot of people to call the planetarium.
We usually do. When Venus is in the evening sky, we get an increase in the number of calls of people calling up, not so much saying that, you know, a UFO landed in my backyard, but I saw something which was very bright. It seemed too bright to be a star, and in fact, they're right there. And it was in the western sky. You know, what was it? They're, you know, they think that they've seen something unusual, and they want to know what it is. And I think you'd find if you asked, you know, any astronomical group or the police even, you'd find that when Venus is prominent or Jupiter's prominent, that you get an increase in the number of UFO reports.
Well, apart from the planets in the sky, which really do look like stars, they rise in the east, set in the west, and they move very, very slowly through the sky as the months go by. There are other things that we see in the sky which actually do move very quickly, and these are meteors.
Exactly. Meteors last at the most only a minute or two. They sort of flash through the atmosphere, and as they, a very bright meteor, as it comes through the atmosphere, often breaks up and fragments, so you get not just one bright fireball, but actually a stream of glowing particles streaking across the sky like that.
What exactly are these meteors made of, John, and how large are they?
Well, most meteors that hit the atmosphere are just about the size of grains of sand or pieces of dust. You get the odd one that's you know, the size of a piece of gravel. That's a fairly large one, and then you actually do get ones that are, you know, several meters across, and these are massive objects. They can even be seen in the daylight sky.
I believe we have a slide of a meteor breaking up as it comes through the atmosphere.
This is a very bright fireball that was seen streaking over the eastern states all the way from down around Maryland all the way up to Ottawa. And as this one passed through the atmosphere, you can see that it's fragmented and broken up. Now, this is an actual meteor. In March 3rd of 1968, a Russian booster did the same thing. What you have is just an object from space coming down to the atmosphere. And this Russian booster broke up, fragmented like this, and several people across the eastern states from Illinois through Kentucky, Indiana, saw this phenomena, and they reported it as a UFO. And in fact, the next slide shows a sketch of what one of the witnesses to this event reported that he saw. He drew out and said, this is what I saw. And you can see the head of it's cut off a bit there, but it looks like a bunch of windows, and that's what he saw these fragments as lighted windows inside of what he thought to be a spacecraft. And then you've got this sort of flame appearance at the head and at the tail.
It would be a very exciting and scary thing to see, and just recently this Russian satellite that has come down probably would have looked very much like this, breaking up. When Skylab came down in 1979, it looked like fireworks and lit up the whole sky, and anyone who didn't know what it was would certainly be scared. And
well, certainly the mind tends to fill in details. If you look at something that's unexpected and bright in the sky, most people, one of the first things that comes to their mind anyway is UFO, and once you're thinking that way, then you start to say, well, those, you know, in this case of this gentleman, well, those bright points are windows. In fact, the identity of that object was known conclusively because NORAD tracks with their radar every object that's in orbit. And so they were able to show that, you know, from the time these people said, well, I saw it, you know, at 8 o'clock in the evening, and they know that this Russian rocket re-entered at exactly 8 o'clock. So this one was conclusively we were able to show that, in fact, this wasn't a UFO, it was a natural phenomenon. It's not always that easy. This is, I guess, an ideal example of that sort of thing.
Well, the fact is you're always having meteors coming down, not always as bright as the moon or very, very bright, breaking apart. Just sometimes they're little wisps of light that usually you can only see out in the country, right? You have to have the dark sky. But what other things can you see that might look unidentified to anyone who didn't know what they really were?
Well, one thing that most people don't realize is that when you're just in the early evening, when it's just getting dark on the Earth, up above, 10 or 15 miles up in the atmosphere, you're still in sunlight because of the curvature of the Earth. We can be in night, and yet objects up in an altitude can be suffused with sunlight, and so they seem to glow against a black sky. The next slide, in fact, demonstrates the geometry that happens with this. Here we have sort of a diagram with a cloud at the left-hand side of the screen there, just sort of floating up just above the limb of the Earth, and so that cloud would be in sunlight. And the next slide after this shows what this looks like in actual fact when you witness it. This is a photograph. Then the next slide is a photograph of a cloud.
Called what?
This is a lenticular cloud.
Lenticular cloud.
It's that name derives from its sort of round lens-like shape. So it actually looks very much, and in fact, when you see it, you'll be able to to see how something like this could easily be mistaken for a UFO. It has that sort of classic saucer-like shape. The sky is getting dark behind it, and yet this thing is still glowing from the sunlight that's falling upon it.
Okay, I think we have a call. Good evening. Thanks for phoning Astronomy Toronto.
How do you do?
Hi, how are you tonight?
Not bad, thanks.
Good.
The gentleman just said that some of the things that cross through the sky are made up of particles perhaps as big as gravel.
Yes, some meteors are.
And what holds them all in? What holds them in a line that would be close enough to make things as visible to the eye?
You're referring, sir, to the stream of particles that we showed in the slide? Well, that actually isn't just a swarm that's come in as one group. What's actually happened in that instance is that one large object has hit the atmosphere, and because it's traveling at such tremendous speed, when it hits the atmosphere, it breaks up during the heating and during the descent through the atmosphere. It starts out as one piece and then fragments into all those separate ones.
And from then on it's demolished, eh?
Yes, it gradually, most of them burn up completely and then vaporize in the atmosphere. A few large pieces do survive occasionally, and then it falls to Earth as what we know of as a meteorite.
Well, I was in the lobby at the planetarium, and they showed the path of Halley's Comet, and it's a great oval. Well, what holds that thing in its orbit? I mean,
the same thing, sir, that holds the planets in their orbits. It's the sun's gravity. Gravity is not something that ends at a certain limit. It gets weaker the further out you go from the sun, but even out at the limit of the orbit of Halley's Comet, it's still strong enough to keep the comet from escaping.
I see. Thank you very kindly.
You're welcome.
Okay, thank you. Good evening. Thanks for phoning.
I have a question for you. What about these fragments that are going to fall down to the Earth from the Russians?
You're talking about these Cosmos reconnaissance spy satellites?
That's right. Now, what about the rest? I mean, it is radioactive. All of it is radioactive.
Not quite all of it, sir. The reactor generator part of the satellite is radioactive, contains enriched uranium, and that's the dangerous part. In fact, the whole satellite isn't radioactive.
No, but doesn't the rest of the radioactivity, whenever it is radioactive, doesn't it remain radioactive for the rest of its life?
The radioactivity decays slowly over time.
Not even if you vaporize it. It's
oh yes,
radioactive.
Oh yeah. Even if it burns up in the atmosphere, yeah, sure. You still get individual atoms of uranium in the atmosphere which are radioactive. Yeah.
Well, shouldn't we do something about?
I think that's a marvelous suggestion, sir. I'd agree wholeheartedly with any measure that would keep radioactive materials from contaminating the atmosphere, and certainly try and keep nuclear materials from orbit. But that's a little bit off the topic of discussion this evening. But
No,
I'm sure that's a concern of a great number of people.
Yes?
The reason I called is just that I caught your program just by chance. And I'm very interested in astronomy.
Well, I'm glad you tuned in.
And I wish you would send me some schedule that you have for your program.
Well, the programming of Astronomy Toronto is seen the last Wednesday of every month, but if you were to phone Rogers, they'd be glad to give you a schedule.
Or perhaps contact the Royal Astronomical Society.
Contact the Royal Astronomical Society of Canada.
Well, that's all right. But what about the rest of us who would like to have some publications that would be to our advantage?
Well, if you would give us a call, the RASC, Royal Astronomical Society, would be glad, or call us after the show. I'd be glad to talk to you, but we really want to talk about UFOs tonight, okay? I don't mean to cut you off, but talk to us later.
All right.
Thank you very much. Good evening.
Hi. I'd like to talk to you about Halley's Comet. I understand that it's going to appear very recently, and I don't know exactly when. And if it's going to be, if its expected brightness is going to live up to its expectations, if you get my drift.
Got it perfectly.
Well, Randy, comets are not my field of expertise. Comets are a difficult thing to predict exactly how bright they're going to appear. We do know that the alignment of the comet, the Earth, and the Sun is not favorable on this return, and that even if the comet lives up to our greatest hopes for its brightness, it's still going to be extremely difficult to see from the northern hemisphere.
I think if anyone remembers about, 1974, Comet Kohoutek. If anyone
Yes, the
remembers
great
that,
fizzler.
I sure remember that one.
Well-
It was very disappointing.
well, what the latest word is, don't expect Halley's Comet to look any better, unfortunately.
I've been expecting it to be very nicely seen because
Well,
over the years, all I've heard about is how spectacular it looks.
Well, it has great PR, you can assure, but all the planetariums in the world are starting to send out messages, don't expect great things from Halley's Comet, but there's still going to be a lot of...
It's still going to be a
disappointing-
very exciting return because of the variety of missions that are being sent out to explore the comet.
That's right.
The Japanese, the Europeans, the Russians are all sending space probes to fly through the tail and the coma of the object. There'll be astronomers around the world. They'll be keeping track of it almost around the clock, and it should be quite an exciting return, even if you don't get a good show in your backyard when you go out to look at it in the evening.
Well, can I just ask you one quick question? Have they spotted it yet? That's all I'd like to know. Do you know if it's
Yes,
coming
it
to
has
view
been
yet?
picked up.
Oh,
It has
that's
been
great.
recovered.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Bye.
The interesting thing about Comet Halley, I guess, or Halley's Comet or Halley's Comet is this whole rigmarole about the pronunciation. The man who it was named after, actually, Edmund Halley, was the first person to predict the return of a comet. His name was Halley. The popular version is Halley. All other comets, when you refer to, say, Comet Bradfield, the word comet comes first and the name second, so there's a whole kerfuffle, and no one seems quite sure exactly what to call it.
Well, it's the most popular comet around, that's for sure. Good evening, thanks for phoning.
Hi, how you doing?
Good, how are you?
Well, first of all, I want to ask, have you ever seen a UFO, and can you explain what it looked like?
It was rather interesting when I was doing research for the show UFO Myth or Mystery, which we presented at the planetarium. I was working at home late one evening. I was in my living room, had been reading intensively about UFOs and was concentrating, and I sort of looked up for a moment, glanced out my window, and there was an extremely bright,
Is that how you got involved in it?
How I got involved with the study of UFOs? No, I was intrigued by the subject beforehand, but to continue the story, I looked up, saw this very, very bright object, and what I immediately thought of, because I was working on UFOs, was, oh no, they've come to get me, here they are. They're going to beam me up and I'll end up on Alpha Centauri. But, you know, after a second, after I'd looked at the object, I realized, well, of course, what this is Venus, and it's just because I glanced up and I had moved my head quickly that this thing seemed to move across the sky. When I looked at it for a couple of seconds more, I realized, of course, what it was.
Also,
That's about the closest I've come. I've never had little green men land on my doorstep and ask for a
so it
grilled
was
cheese
only
sandwich.
Venus, right?
That was only Venus, yeah.
Okay, and one more thing. You know, I've been watching these science shows lately, and they showed one a while ago with these big reflectors that reflect. You just get the other one. With these little reflectors that are on the Earth, big mirrors, and these different ways that they're trying to communicate. Is there any communication things going on right now?
There are no current efforts to send messages to other civilizations. Most of the attempts at communication have been listening using the large radio telescopes, such as the one at Algonquin Park, I know has been used infrequently, and various other radio telescopes around the world. There are sometimes organized searches. It's difficult in these times, these hard economic times, to get funding for a search for intelligent life. And a lot of the projects that have been undertaken are sort of informal. What you'll have is a radio astronomer or two who have an observing project. They're looking at a quasar or something, working on their research. They'll have a couple of hours left over, and they'll say, "Hey, listen, why don't we tune in on a couple of stars, you know, just to pass the time and see if we pick up on anything." And you'd be surprised, really, how much telescope time has been logged in that way, listening for hopefully some signal that would come in from somewhere.
So it'll just be coincidence when we pick up the first signal.
Well, it may not be. It's just the fact that it's you can't predict you just can't predict discovery. It's such a chance thing. Even under the most optimistic estimates for the frequency of intelligent life, it's still like millions to one are the odds.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you. Bye, Mark.
Hi, Mark. Okay, can we go to the next slide, which is an optical illusion, and this is really something that UFO spotters have to deal with.
Yeah, unfortunately the slide's cut off a bit. This is optical illusions are something, as you say, that you have to take into account when you're looking at UFOs. On the left side of the screen, you can just see a bit, and unfortunately not all, but it's the outline of a man, a person, and it looks like they're walking on the water. This is just an optical illusion again because you have air masses of different temperature. The guy is actually walking on the beach, but it looks like he's walking on the water. Well, you have the same sort of phenomena that happens not only with visible light, and that can make lights which are actually on the ground from distant automobiles or trains for that matter appear to be suspended in midair. It can also happen to radar. Radar beams, which are used at airport for keeping track of the traffic, shot up in the air. But again, in the same way that light is bent in a mirage, you can have radar beams which are bent back down to the earth, can reflect off of a tall building, a water tower, or anything, and then this shows up as what's called a radar angel, an unidentified object on the screen. Now, most experienced radar operators recognize these things when they see them, but again, because of the changes in the atmospheric density and things, you can have, there have been cases of water towers being clocked at 10,000 miles per hour, which is quite a remarkable feat. And in fact, defense radars, the very powerful defense radars that they use up to watch for missiles coming over the pole and the pine tree line are able to pick up objects as small as a single insect or flocks of birds. They even use radar to predict the weather because even moisture in the atmosphere reflects radar waves. So radar is not absolutely infallible, and optical illusions, radio illusions do exist.
Okay. In the next couple slides here, we're looking at what exactly?
We're going back in the past a bit. Although I said that the modern UFO era started in 1947, in fact, unidentified things in the air are not a totally modern phenomena. This is an airship that was reported seen in the 1890s. In this particular case, Jules Verne, the famous science fiction novelist, had written a book called Rober the Conqueror, in which the hero travels around the world in an airship. What happened when the English translation came out and was published in the States, you had a whole series of sightings of strange aerial craft traveling at the then unbelievable speed of 200 miles per hour. This was fantastic. Nothing could travel that fast. Well, sure enough, there was an explanation for that, and it was that people had picked up on the idea. It had been popularized in Verne's account. People like Count Ferdinand von Zeppelin were working on building lighter-than-air craft, and in fact, soon after these early airship reports, the first Zeppelin was in fact launched. And this is a picture of Count Ferdinand von Zeppelin's first successful lighter-than-air ship. It was launched 5 years after this initial sort of public sort of phenomena of airships being reported.
Well, apart from people seeing things that they don't know really what it is, so therefore it's unidentified, there have been examples where people have actually hoaxed photographs or sightings of UFOs.
Yeah. Now this is really the exception to the rule. Most of the people who report UFOs are really well-meaning. They're honest. They're basically good people. They just don't understand what they see. But there are those who, for reasons of fame, they want to make a little money off it, or they just want some attention. They dream up or fix up their own UFO encounter.
We have a few slides of really what you can do. Is it in the darkroom they're doing this?
You can do this a variety of ways. This picture was rigged up by our photographer at the planetarium, Chris Sasaki, and he just took a picture of the city, took the film into the darkroom, shone a little pin light on the film, and this is what he ended up with, a bright disk over the city. The next one is a sort of similar type of picture, and in this case also we have a city taken at dusk, but in this case what he's done, Chris has set up a light inside the room, and he shot the picture through a window. so that what you're seeing is a reflection of the light off the window, but it looks like it's outside over the city. And the last example is probably the most common type of UFO photographic hoax anyway, and that's just, in this case, the lens cap from the camera itself hung on a thread in front of the camera over an apartment building. So it appears that there's a saucer about to beam up the penthouse.
Good evening. Thanks for phoning.
Hello. I've heard that Mars has various red, dark, white, and yellow patches, and I was wondering if this represents life on Mars.
Life on Mars? No. Mars was, for a long time, hoped to be the best place for life in the solar system. The white spots on Mars at the North and the South Pole are ice caps, frozen carbon dioxide, and also frozen water, much as the same as the ice caps on the Earth. The dark markings and the light markings, which change with the seasons, which were originally thought to be vegetation changing in much the same way that the leaves change on the trees here. Actually, it's just wind-blown dust. There are seasonal dust storms on Mars, and as the wind blows the dust around, it just changes the surface features. So it's not really life. Unfortunately, the Vikings tested, the two Viking landers looked for life. Unfortunately, there's none there. I really hope that they had found, I really wanted them to find something.
A lot of people did. Got lots of rocks on Mars. We want rocks, go to Mars.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye. Hi, good evening.
Yeah, I read something in the Reader's Digest a long time ago about a great explosion, and they related it to a UFO over it was just in some remote area in Russia.
Yeah, I believe you're referring to the Tunguska explosion.
That's right. And like that seemed to point so much towards some alien entry by a spacecraft into the atmosphere, according to this article, which was probably biased. But
yeah,
if there's been any updates on this story?
It's an interesting phenomena. What happened in Tunguska, because the explosion, as you say, was just enormous. It leveled trees for miles around. Sort of all the trees fell outwards from this initial explosion. There have been a number of theories that have been advanced. One of them being that it was a UFO with a defective muffler, and they were trying to find a good garage, but they blew up in midair before they managed to land. Just kidding a bit there. Another theory was that it was perhaps a black hole, a mini black hole that just happened to blam right through the Earth. When it hit the crust, it exploded, and then it came out the other side, supposedly near Labrador or something. And that's
sounds good.
Why the fishing is down in George's Bank or something. And the other theory, which I subscribe to myself and the best supported, is that it's a comet which entered the atmosphere and again, like a meteor, the comet, as it came down to the atmosphere, disintegrated. But in this case, because comets have a lot of volatile material on them, instead of just disintegrating and fragmenting, it actually blew up in the air over this remote site in Siberia. So those are the stories that I've heard. The comet hypothesis is the one that's best supported, as far as I know.
Are the Russians being very cooperative on this matter, or do you know if they're letting foreign scientists get in and examine it?
Well, the problem with investigating the event is that we're now doing it about 70 years after the fact. This thing happened, I'm not sure of the exact date, but I think it was sometime around 1910. And so any investigation of that, to do it now is, it's really too late. Whatever evidence that you had hoped to find would be buried probably by now.
They won't be doing any more research on the problem.
I don't think so.
I don't really think when they went there, a few years after it, when they first went there, they didn't find anything.
They tested for radioactivity.
There were no rocks on the ground. There was nothing, just all these trees for tens of miles, and I think 100 miles away it blew cows over or something. Just amazing, the force involved.
All the Blintzes in Vladivostok were totally ruined that year. It was terrible.
Okay, thanks for calling. Okay, bye. Good evening.
Hi.
Hi.
Good evening. Do you personally believe in UFOs?
No, sir, I do not. Well, let me qualify that. I'm sorry. I believe that there are things which people see in the sky which they don't understand. If you ask me, do I believe that there are little green men in flying saucers that come from other planets and joyride around through the atmosphere or buzz people just to scare the hell out of them for fun, or even come to steal biological samples, something like ET. No, I don't believe that is the explanation why people see things in the sky.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks very much.
Bye.
Good evening. Thanks for phoning.
Oh, hi. I have a question about how did people react, like your friends and relatives, towards your going into this field of, you know?
Well, that's interesting. A lot of people are curious, and in fact, you know, you say the word UFO to someone, and immediately, you know, you've got someone's interest. It's a very popular topic. My girlfriend's mother, who may be watching this show, hello, Mrs. Ottaway, she's probably gnashing her teeth because she's a very strong supporter of the extraterrestrial hypothesis for UFOs. So, you know, it depends on who you talk to. In a Gallup poll that was conducted not too long ago, it turned out that it was roughly 50-50. I think it was 47% of the Canadian population believes that UFOs are alien spacecraft.
Really?
So, you know, there's support and there are skeptics. I'm one of the skeptics.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Thank
Okay.
you. Good evening. Thanks for phoning.
How are you?
Good.
Yeah, I was listening to you say that you don't believe in people from another planet or anything. Why do you think it is that just Earth would be selected out as the only planet in all the galaxies that would have a sophisticated human beings?
Well, I think perhaps you misunderstood me, because what I meant to say, or perhaps I didn't express it well enough. I firmly believe that there is extraterrestrial life. I do not believe that they have come to visit us here. First of all, the distances between even the closest of stars is enormous. You can't actually fit inside your mind how vast the space is between stars. Even a round-trip journey to Alpha Centauri, the closest star, would take you 10 years at the speed of light.
Well, how sophisticated do you think that the other beings are?
They could be much more advanced than we are right now. I would hope, in fact, that any intelligence in the universe is a little bit smarter than we are, because we do some pretty stupid things ourselves.
You sound pretty pessimistic.
Well, it's just bad headlines in the paper today. No, I'm an optimist. Even if you look at optimistically how much life there is in the universe and how much intelligence there is, even on the most optimistic estimates, you still come down to somewhere around 1 out of every million stars would have an intelligent civilization around it. Now, look at it from their perspective. They're going to have to examine 1 million stars before they actually find one that has life. Are they going to visit 1 million planets before they actually find one, or are they going to send radio messages and try and find out who answers first, and then we'll go visit them?
Well, are you suggesting there's not worth in continuing to look?
It's definitely worthwhile looking. It's definitely worthwhile looking, but I don't believe, and in fact, in 25 years and more than that, decades of UFO research, where people have been coming up to the scientific community and saying, here's our sighting, and in 94% of those cases, not all of them, but 94%, you can come down, you can say, well, what you saw was this, you can find an explanation. And in the bulk of the rest of the 6%, it's either the sightings are incomplete, the information was collected years after the fact. It's not so much that we can't find a conclusive object that it might have been, it's that we don't have enough to go on to make a thorough investigation.
I appreciate that, but you would answer the critics that don't believe that it's worth justifying the expense, especially in the United States, that they make on visiting space and trying to learn.
No, that's not what I said at all. I think that is completely justified.
Yeah.
And in fact, I think it's one of the noblest efforts and perhaps one of the most important questions that face mankind. The ramifications are great. Are we alone? Are we unique? If we are, then we come to appreciate how special and how important we actually are as the only life form in the universe. If, as I believe, we are not alone, then we come through contact to appreciate what our role is within the cosmic community.
I'll ask you one more. How far do you think in your lifetime it's going to go in terms of discovering what's out there?
I really would hesitate to guess. I could, perhaps by analogy, I was sitting watching the first Apollo moon landing with my mother. She said, I never thought I'd live to see that. So there are probably things that I don't think I'll live to see that we actually will.
Dynamite, nice talking to you.
Okay.
Thanks very much.
Bye-bye.
Well, it's very easy to create a UFO. And just to prove to everyone out there that you can make your own homemade UFO, John and I spent a Sunday afternoon making one, and we have a little short clip of just how, if we can do it, anyone can do it. And this might give you an idea of really how simple UFOs can be just to make. So why don't we just watch this clip.
it's remarkably easy to carry out a UFO hoax if you really want to, either by just telling people of some remarkable sighting, and most of the time people will want to believe you in a situation like that. It's very easy if you have a dark room or if you're knowledgeable in photographic techniques to take pictures which, for all intents and purposes, look like an actual UFO encounter. Or you can even show people a UFO if you're willing to go to a little bit of time and trouble and build something that will represent or be perceived as an actual UFO in a close encounter type of situation. Now, most UFO sightings are not hoaxes. They're misidentifications of a natural object, either an airplane with advertising lights or Venus or something of that nature. But here we've constructed a UFO very easily in about half an hour, and it consists of a bag, a couple of pieces of balsa wood, and some birthday candles, and we're going to hopefully get this to fly for you now as a hot air balloon. Now, I don't recommend that you do this. The reason that we're demonstrating this for you is so that you can see how easy it is to do it. Now, if you were to go outside and actually do something like this, it could be very dangerous because with the candles, the wood, and the plastic, it's very flammable, of course. If it got caught in a tree or landed on someone's house, it could start a serious fire. But Randy, if you can come in here now and light this baby for us.
Okay, Josh.
Hopefully, we'll be able to have ignition, launch. And as Randy starts to light the candles, the bag will start to fill out as the hot air begins to fill it up. Hopefully we won't have meltdown. There, the bag is filling up now. We've got 5 candles going. Maybe you need another match there. Don't burn your fingers.
He's a
little bit tricky.
A little bit tricky. You like that one?
And there we go. We've now got all 6 candles going, I think. Have we? Okay. Now this thing is still a little heavy. It doesn't quite want to fly yet, but as the candles burn down and as the weight decreases, the lift from the hot air inside the bag will start to take it off, hopefully skyward. Now we've got this version of our UFO tethered here so that it won't fly up in the planetarium and set fire to our dome. And the candles are still just, oh, there we go. We have lift. And we'll just hold on to it here so it doesn't go too far away. But you can see how effective that is as it rises up. And we'll let out a little bit more thread. And if you can follow that, if we were to let this go, it would probably fly around for about 5 or 10 minutes. Finally, it would burn down as the candles burned out, set fire to the balsa wood, and having done this before, the plastic then goes up in one great flash, and of course it then disappears if you're doing this under a very dark sky. And as in that last flash, you could imagine that as the ion warp drive cutting in and the flying saucer zooms off into another dimension. And so there it is, a UFO, homemade, and actually functioning. And you can imagine for yourself what this thing would look like on a dark sky, on a moonless night. And we'll just reel this thing down in again before it gets carried too far away, and blow it out before we actually set fire to anything. So there you have it, the first indoor Canadian UFO Championships. And I'd just like to emphasize anyone out there who thinks, gee, that looks like a lot of fun, why don't we go out and launch one tonight and scare the wits out of Mrs. Murphy? Please don't do that. First of all, I'd like to re-emphasize, it is very dangerous because when those things do burn down, when the candles burn down, they can, if a burning fragment falls on a tree or on someone's house, it can start a fire. And also just launching something like that can have you brought up on criminal charges for public mischief and something like that. So don't do it. Save yourself a lot of grief.
Good evening. Thanks for phoning.
Hi there.
Hi.
I was wondering if you had any theories on why, let's say, the U.S. government was holding back information on UFOs, if you believe that or not?
I don't believe the U.S. government is holding back any information that it has on file on UFOs. The CIA cleared out their files under the U.S. Freedom of Information Act. They cleared out about 300 documents. A lot of those were duplicates. A lot of those were memos going from one department to another saying, listen guys, we don't want to have to deal with this. You know, we're not interested anymore. We're satisfied that there's nothing going on that we should know about. How about you guys handling it? And then, you know, Joe Brown in the next department saying, no, we don't want to touch it. You take it, you know. There was nothing in those documents that were released which were never intended to be released too. It wasn't as if they sort of said, well, hey, let's release a bunch of stuff and we'll fool everyone. These were documents which were never intended to be released, but which were demanded by the courts through Freedom of Information. There was nothing in them.
I see. There was also a film crew in Guatemala City. They were filming a commercial.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you've heard about this. I just read in the paper about a blurb. They were filming a commercial and they spotted a UFO, and they filmed it. I don't know if you know anything about that anymore.
I'm really not familiar with that sighting, so I really couldn't comment on it. I'm sorry.
What about Jupiter, the probe's going up soon? Do you know anything about that? A satellite they plan to launch?
Project Galileo is the next spacecraft that's due to be launched to Jupiter. As far as I know, that project is still
ongoing by
its
threads.
Yeah, but
I believe the most optimistic date is 1985 or 1986, and this is a spacecraft which will not zoom by, but actually go around Jupiter in orbit.
And send a probe into the atmosphere as well.
It should be quite an exciting mission.
Could be a landing on one of the moons. They've thought about doing that, haven't they?
I don't know of any plans to land on any of the moons. It certainly would be a worthwhile project, but I don't know of any plans on tap.
That's great.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Good evening.
Hi. I was just wondering, you said earlier that you didn't think that we were being visited by UFOs and so forth. And I was just wondering how you could say that in light of all the information that's passed on through history, you know, references in the Bible and all the von Daniken's research and so forth. So do you just put that aside and say that it doesn't exist, or?
Well, first of all, von Daniken is a charlatan.
Yeah,
as far as I'm concerned. The man has absolutely zero academic credibility. As far as the sightings in the Bible, if the Bible said, and little green men came forth and spake thus unto Adam, I would take it. But what you have are classical visions. These are men who are prophets. They're men of God. They're not out to say that we've been visited by anyone. It's only after the fact, in light of the fact that UFOs are such a popular modern phenomena, that people go back and say, hey, well, this could have been a UFO. This could have been a UFO here. I don't put any strength in that. And furthermore, that all aside, it's just that in decades and decades and thousands, literally thousands of sightings that have been documented, not a single one of them has come up with absolutely incontrovertible positive proof. And I think the weight of the argument has now shifted over onto the UFO proponents. We in sort of what has been vilified as the conservative scientific establishment have done our best to present our case, and I think we've done a pretty damn good job of it. And I think it's time for the UFO proponents to put up and say, well, here's the evidence.
Okay, I see what you mean about the Bible is open to interpretation and so forth. But what about the cases where, like the Mayas and the Egyptians, civilizations in different parts of the world with basically the same sort of I don't know, drawings on the walls, if you will, or whatever.
Okay, those drawings on the Mayan temples, if you talk to someone who's expert in Mayan motifs, what you find is that those are not spaceship controls. Those are common symbols that are used in Mayan drawings everywhere. And I've spoken to people at the museum about this, and they don't give any credence.
You get the same sort of basic drawings in the Egyptian pyramids as well, though, don't you? And
there are no drawings in the pyramids that I know of. There are drawings in other temples around Egypt, but I've never traveled through Egypt, and I've never seen anything that looked quite like the Mayan temple drawings.
Well, it's not the drawings I've seen. I've read books where the drawings are basically the same as the Mayans and the Aztecs and so on. But not only that, but what about the basic pyramid form? That's in almost
a lot of people
every,
use pillars too all over the world. Chinese use pillars, Greeks use pillars, Romans use pillars. You know, that doesn't mean that the pillar came from the sky. The pyramid is a natural geometric form, and you know, it's perfectly understandable that this is a motif that's used worldwide.
Okay, that may be true, but again, how do you account for the perfect base of the pyramid and the angles at which the pyramid hits the...
A lot of people, if I can interrupt, a lot of people think that because these things were built 5,000 years ago, that they were built by a bunch of dummies. And in fact, they weren't. The Egyptians living 5,000 years ago had just as much intelligence as we have today, and they could hold up two poles and sight along them and draw a straight line, and they were masters of geometry. There's no question, but there's nothing mysterious about drawing straight lines or laying out a perfect grid or building symmetrical shapes. All you have to do is have a basic understanding of geometry, some basic surveying tools for sighting along lines, and you can do it. You and a bunch of friends, if you set your mind to it, to build a pyramid. Well, you need quite a bunch, but
well,
it's really not that difficult.
The blocks themselves that were used to build the pyramids, from what I've read, come from quite a distance from the actual building site.
Mm-hmm.
And the labor availability at the time, I read that it would take, I don't know, 100 years or whatever to build one pyramid. Just
again, these are von Daniken's figures, and if you talk to people who are experts in archaeology and in these matters, they'll tell you that there are mechanisms. They rolled the blocks on logs, and that they supported the blocks to build the chambers inside on sand, and then took the sand out, and that left them standing. There, you know, you could go on and on and on, but there really is no mystery. And if you don't believe me, I suggest you talk to some experts in the field for yourself, and they'll tell you how it was done.
If I can just switch subjects for a second, do I have time, or?
Well,
we've got a lot of calls. Maybe we could get on to another one.
Okay.
Thanks for phoning.
Right.
Bye. Good evening. Thanks for waiting. Thanks for calling.
Good evening. My question is, about some years back, they had in either the Inquirer or the Black Knight Globe or whatever they call it, about the Russians claiming about having a sort of like a alien base up on Titan, the moon of Saturn. Has any of our probes proven them wrong?
Well, there's been no... Titan was the subject of intense scrutiny, and as far as I know, Randy, there was nothing that came out about an alien base up there? Or,
no, I didn't see any hammers and sickles in any of the Voyager spacecraft photos.
Nothing. The National Enquirer,
I wouldn't believe a word.
I would question its you know, the reliability of the information that they have. It's, you know, it's not the sort of stuff that you can really take too seriously. I remember a National Enquirer headline not that long ago, a few years ago, about a man who had been abducted by a UFO supposedly for the 4th time. Not once, not twice, not thrice, but 4 times. That stretches my credulity just a bit.
Yes, I can accept that part. But I was just thinking, with all the money wasted sending up so many probes within who knows how long, not one statement was brought out about that from our side of the curtain. And I was just thinking whether that was just a Soviet's way of propaganda, or if that was going to try to push the Americans to go a little farther into research and stuff.
Maybe it's National Enquirer propaganda, but I don't know.
Yeah.
If we've got a hotline with the Russians and finding out what they're doing on Titan or whatever.
I would just suggest that there are you know, less than reliable journalists in Russia, the same as there are less than reliable journalists in North America, and that's probably the bottom line on that issue.
Mm-hmm. And like I'm sorry, I came into seeing your program late, so I don't know all you've talked about. Is there a little booklet or something you'd be sending out at the end of the week or whatever that we can, like the Americans would do?
No, I don't have any publication, but if you're interested in finding out more about UFOs, certainly go to your library. Philip Klass, his last name is Klass, is certainly one author who has investigated the field from the skeptical point of view. Dr. Alan Hynek is more on the pro-UFO side, so if you looked at the UFO section, looked at maybe those 2 authors, you'd get a balanced view and maybe be able to make your own judgment.
I see. Thank you very much, sir.
Okay.
Thanks for phoning this evening. Good Good evening, and thanks for phoning.
Hello. I just want to wonder, do you think there's any extraterrestrials on Earth?
Right now, no, I don't think ET has come to visit yet. I'd certainly be thrilled to death if aliens actually did land on the planet, but I don't think there are any here among us now. I sometimes wonder about my big brother, but I think he's just weird, that's all.
Do you think that the people that are searching for an extraterrestrial, that they might find one?
Do you mean searching like with big radio telescopes?
Yeah, like that satellite going around like Jupiter and all that.
Well, I don't know about satellites going around about Jupiter, but people who are investigating and looking for extraterrestrial signals, if they're patient, patience might involve not just, you know, a few years, but it might take centuries. If we make a concerted, committed effort and a sustained effort, I would think that sooner or later, at least I would like to think, I'm hopeful, I'm optimistic, I keep my fingers and my toes crossed that yes, we would come up with a signal sometime.
What do you think about UFOs?
Well, I think I've pretty well stated my case on UFOs. I think that there are lots of things that are seen in the sky which aren't understood, but I don't think they're spacecraft.
Okay, thanks very much. We got to go now.
Okay, bye.
Okay, bye. I think the important thing, too, is that these, well, it's not scientists. When you say scientists, it's such a collective word.
Oh, okay.
But, you know, they say, well, scientists say that they're wrong, that there aren't UFOs, but all these people who are the astronomers and everyone who really don't, they say that we're not being visited by spacecraft, they would love to discover. I mean, that's what they're doing. They're spending their time, as you say, listening to stars and sending out the Voyager spacecraft with records on the side. You know, they're going to go to the stars, we're sending out the sounds of Earth. So it's not that we're not trying to rain on anyone's parade. We're just talking about UFOs tonight and looking at both sides.
Trying to make sure order.
Excuse me. Hi.
Hi. I was wondering, like a long time ago, I watched this show, and I don't remember quite what it was called, but they had this, like, they found a alien creature or something, and they froze it in deep space, and I was always wondering whatever happened to that.
Well, this is the persistent rumor that there is in Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in the United States alien that has been wrapped up in a Glad garbage bag or something and stuck in the deep freeze along with a couple of hamburgers and somebody's leftover lunch from Tuesday. That's one of those rumors that just won't die because people want to believe it. It's sort of like you know, that Mick Jagger is actually you know, a woman in drag or something. If you tell people a story that they want to believe and that has the information that they're set to accept, then that story acquires a life of its own. To give you an example, sort of an analogy of the same sort of thing, in January 20th, 1979, the Toronto Star published a story, front page headline, banner headline, "Our Jets Scramble After UFOs." That became the topic of conversation for weeks afterwards. People were coming up to me and saying, hey, what about the UFO that the Air Force went up after, eh? Well, people don't realize that what happened 2 days later, a story was published that wasn't on the front page, wasn't a banner headline. It was buried in the middle of the paper, little thing about that big, and what it was saying, oh, well, actually it was just a crystallized ice in the atmosphere that showed up on the radar, and they weren't sure what it was. They scrambled the jets, but they found out that it was nothing. You don't hear about the explanations. You only hear about the initial reports, and it's the same with these reports about aliens being frozen in this Air Force base in the States. You hear the story, but you don't ever hear that the Air Force has opened up the whole base, have invited the press through, have shown that they don't have anything hidden. The story is so good, and you want to believe it so much that it has a life of its own.
Because I was really, like, I read up on these kind of things and stuff like that.
Okay, thanks very much. We're going to have to cut you off. We're about out of time.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.
You really have to be a PR expert to understand all the UFO goings on, don't you?
It's a busy field, and when you have an area where there are literally, a couple of dozen sightings pouring in every day, there aren't enough people to investigate them all, and also you just have to, to try and keep up with the flood of information. It is a challenge.
Well, thank you very much for coming here tonight, John, and enlightening us and telling us a bit about really what the UFOs are and what we're looking up in the sky.
It's been a pleasure, Randy.
And I'd like to thank everyone out there this evening for watching and participating in our little discussion on UFOs. Astronomy Toronto is broadcast on the Rogers Cable Network the last Wednesday of every month. And next month's show is going to be very, very interesting. As many of you realize, 10 years ago, man last walked on the moon. And many of you out there may be wondering, well, what have we found out with all those rocks that they brought back, some 800 pounds of rocks? What have we learned about the moon and about our Earth and our solar system since then? Well, next month, my guest will be Dr. Strangway from the University of Toronto, who worked on the lunar samples, worked in NASA for the 3 years during the Apollo program, and he's going to be discussing really what we found out about those lunar samples. Also, we'll be talking to Edgar Mitchell, who walked on the moon. Join us then. Thanks for watching Astronomy Toronto. And my name is Randy Attwood. Good night and bye for now.